and welcome to another Wrestling Roundtable discussion podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by Andy Murray and Michael Sidgwick from WhatCulture to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes or Spotify for daily podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views. We have more roundtable discussion, we have interviews, and we have a round of the week complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But gents, the question I want you to answer today revolves around the ongoing issue with British wrestling, the British wrestling row, let's call it. I want to know whose side you're on. And the catalyst for this discussion today, really, is a tweet that was sent by Justin Sizem over the last few days discussing the situation surrounding British wrestling. I'll sort of summarise what he said. He said, last week it came to light through independent UK promotions who've been left uncertain of the future that WWE NXT UK talent have apparently been signed to new contracts, allegedly preventing many of them from wrestling for any promotion outside of the WWE banner from the start of 2019. He goes on to basically say that people are going to be allowed to sort of see out their contractual obligations towards the end of this year, but after that, they are not allowed to wrestle anyone contracted to New Japan, Impact, Ring of Honor, World of Sport, and other major promotions. And he concludes by saying, I'd sooner die on my sword in defeat than watch what makes our industry so free, diverse, and inclusive for both wrestlers and fans alike get eroded away as part of a corporate strategy to get a bigger share price and global market position. First of all, your reaction when you heard this?
It kind of hit the internet like a freight train, that tweet, didn't it? It really exploded. Straight away, responses from all the big dogs of British wrestling, Pete Dunne, Trent Seven, Tyler Bate. I'm sure we'll get to those. I think I'm with him, you know? As silly as the presentation of this tweet was with him in his big Thor outfit.
I mean, that undermined it big time.
Yeah. Like, come on, brother. Maybe just
like... If you're going to do something that is essentially a plea for attention that's meant to be the subtext, like, mate, don't make it the text.
Yeah.
Like, don't put yourself, like, over the text. I mean, it was incredibly reasonable, but it just looked a bit silly. It really did look silly.
He made a really good point and presented himself like a goober.
Yeah, he does make some very valid points.
He does.
But is he the guy who should be making them, or is it not the fans to be making those points?
You maybe the only thing I can think of is if he decided to say these sort of things because he has arguably a bigger platform on Twitter than the rest of them. You know, he's obviously, we've seen him in World of Sport. I think we've worked with him in Defiant Wrestling as well. So he's a known name and arguably just wants to shine more of a light onto it.
I mean, fair enough. I think like he was on the national TV platform of World of Sport, of course, Justin Sizem. Like, he's a very, very good wrestler. Mm-hmm. It's just the presentation is a little bit weird of this whole thing.
And I think, from what I know of wrestling, being an outsider, obviously, they take the idea of the boys and the brotherhood seriously. Mm-hmm. So for one of them to go rogue, and no matter how well-informed or well-intentioned the point, like, people are not going to like it. And as we'll discover soon, people did not like it at all.
Something that I find quite interesting is, of course, Chris Brooks of CCK famously turned the WWE contract down a few months ago and cut this impassioned in-ring promo where he said essentially the same thing. I want to stay and I want to build this up. None of this response for him. So what's the difference? Is it the presentation?
It's a presentation. Like,
it
was Roman Gladiator.
I mean, fair enough. Chris Brooks doesn't dress up as a Roman Gladiator.
No, I've got all the respect in the world for this because it's a point that no matter how the boys perceive it, this is something the fandom would like expressed by somebody on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
Because, in answer to the actual question, like, I'm bang on his side. Like, what WWE's doing is so nakedly transparent in their own interests, man. It's horrible.
Now, you say that, but we should get to the responses we saw, like you say, from the likes of Trent Seven, Tyler Bate, and Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne says, every step myself and other members of the NXT UK roster have taken within WWE over the past 2 years has been nothing but a benefit to the independent scene. Don't disregard that because of hearsay and rumours. Tyler Bate echoing it, basically saying, wrestling is based off nothing but rumours. Don't believe everything you read. And Trent Seven went further, saying, hang your head in shame, Justin. We've all worked incredibly hard over the past few years to create a thriving scene for all levels of talent to perform on. Delete your tweet and stop seeking attention.
That Trent Seven tweet is something else. That's something a 12-year-old troll who lives in his mum and dad's basement tweets out of people. Delete your tweet and stop seeking attention. It's like, come on, guys. Like, these are the three biggest beneficiaries of the WWE system, right? Pete Dunne is the star. Tyler Bate is a star. Trent Seven's his mate. Nah, I'm joking. Trent Seven's really good. Like, these are the guys at the center of all this. It's very, very easy for them to say this. And they offer absolutely nothing in response. They just say, don't believe the rumors. Lads, they're not rumors. There's historical context to this.
There's historical precedent. It's actually happening right now. We'll see more of it in the months to come. And I think it's a weirdly defensive gambit, this, because why on earth did they have to respond with something so flagrantly, like, it's stupid, basically.
You talk about the history of this in the past. For those of people who aren't aware, just enlighten us about how this issue has arguably reared its ugly head in years past.
Well, in the early 1980s, Vince McMahon performed a kind of a clandestine operation to expand nationally in the first place, and he did this by persuading promoters to lend him his talent and videotapes of them on a umbrella show showcasing everyone. And when those performers became known to the public, he then paid for their services outright, and he basically maneuvered himself into a position where he had every name over performer in America either in his promotion or ready to come into his promotion. And he did this by completely screwing over promoters by insinuating and pretending that he was going to be a friend and an ally to them, which is exactly the same thing he has done to James Smallman and Mark Dallas, who have basically signed away their promotions for a high six-figure sum, as reported in last week's Observer. So WWE doesn't want a thriving independent scene. They want to own the wrestling landscape. And these three guys, as Murray points out, are the three biggest beneficiaries of the UK arm of this global strategy. And it just feels like they've kind of turned themselves heel a little bit here.
It's really interesting to me that a lot of people in this discussion have kind of painted WWE as this lovely, benevolent. There
presenter
we go.
Andy
Professional
Murray.
writer Andy Murray. Organization who want to help the indie scene. They want to put an arm around it and they want to help it grow because competition is good and we love competition. What? When has WWE ever been about that? The counter argument to that is, it's Triple H. Well, Triple H is heading this current move to completely eradicate the British indie scene. It's a classic Vince move from Big Paul. I don't understand where the enthusiasm for this comes from at all.
No, especially like, it would be one thing, right, if NXT UK was like a really good program from start to finish.
Yeah.
Their version of British wrestling happened to be really good. The argument would be harder to make. Like, I've watched it and I don't see what's so special about it at all. And I think a lot of the main events have been like cracking, like really good. Basically, put Pete Dunne in there against virtually anybody, much less really good performers. He's going to have an amazing match, and he has basically carried that brand as expected. He is the talisman. That undercard is very uneven, and it could really benefit from. They're all quite inexperienced. They could benefit from traveling the circuit, wrestling more experienced hands, and they're not going to do that because they're now not allowed to do that. And basically, it's going to be a repeat. It's optimistically pitched as NXT in name, but if you're going to get this undercard wrestling each other, and they're not particularly experienced, we're in for a repeat of the blind leading the blind. This is what happened in the dying days of OVW when Jim Cornette wasn't there to steer the ship. This is why Florida Championship Wrestling failed so badly, which was the impetus behind the NXT rehaul in the first place, overhauls, I should say. We're going to get Florida Championship Wrestling UK if we're not there already, because those shows are really, really wildly uneven.
Is this like a worrying transition thing that we're seeing there at the moment? Because from what I can gather, I think a lot of people were relatively happy to see British stars initially being signed up by WWE and being used on those sort of, yes, we're not going to give you regular weekly shows, but as and when we need you, we'll call on you. But the rest of the time, you kind of feel we're going to give you a regular wage, and you're free to go and work for other promotions. And now is the concern, this shift to not only saying we're going to give you a regular wage and you're going to work for us, but these rules about not only you can't work for people, but you can't do certain maneuvers into other promotions.
Yeah, Dave Meltzer in today's, Thursday's, this week's Wrestling Observer has alluded to the fact that Walter had a match with Meiko Satomura in which he wasn't allowed to chop her because now, as a loosely contracted WWE independent contractor, he can't do intergender violence. And apparently there's another remit which tells the guys who do perform on WWE affiliated independent promotions, that you're allowed to do it, but you have to do it in our way, and there's restrictions on the moves they can perform, and this all serves to homogenize everything. And I don't understand how certain wrestlers, many of the British guys have had hilarious banter responses to all this and refuse to take it too seriously, but to those who have, are kind of incriminating their own arguments here because we're seeing it already.
Yeah, I did enjoy Kid Lycos's reply to Justin Sizem here. Simply read, virgin. Very good. With regards to your question, Adam, I think WWE have been very smart in the way they've kind of done this clandestine movement.
It's not Vince doing it, it's Triple H doing it.
It's Paul. It's definitely Paul. Why am I saying Paul? I'm a nerd. Alan. So basically, they held these tournaments and they were tremendous, right?
Yeah.
January 2017, fantastic. Rave reviews across the board. And then they kind of integrate Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne into NXT, and they have that wonderful match on TakeOver. And everyone's buzzing. British wrestling's here in NXT and WWE. Slowly but surely, these things start creeping in. The restrictions, they enter these relationships with more and more companies, and now we're at this stage. But I think anyone who knows the company's history knew this was coming. Dave Meltzer in the Observer back in January 2017, when this deal was initially signed, he was one of the first people to point out the historical comparisons there with the territories in the 80s. And that should have got a lot more people sitting up and taking notice. Unfortunately, as we are guilty of from time to time, we all got caught up in the wave of enthusiasm for these great matches and stuff that were happening. But I think it was inevitable, really.
I think myself and Andy Murray are on the same position on this matter, so I think it would behoove us to address some of the counter arguments to this. A lot of people are saying that how can you possibly begrudge these guys for signing with WWE when they've more likely than not donned a pair of wrestling boots in the first place in order to sign with WWE? And people are saying, how can you expect people to... People have been using the following analogy, like, would you expect a Sunday League player to just want to stay in the Sunday Leagues to help them out or sign for a Premier League side? And I just find that such a false narrative, because NXT UK, like, it's not the Premier League. I've never seen a product, and I've watched Jacked, Velocity, Metal, Sunday Night Heat. I've watched like Superstars, like pretty much everything since like 1990. I've never seen a product that is so unlike WWE as NXT UK is. And I tweeted last night, and I think I'll repeat it here because it's quite prevalent. It might say WWE on the contract, but it isn't WWE. It just doesn't feel like it at all. It feels like and is a glorified British indie.
Yeah, I think, like, as far as the competitors go, I completely understand, of course. I think we all do, why they would want to take these contracts. You know, WWE offer you this guaranteed 20-odd thousand pounds a year. You don't have to go to these towns and make 50 quid in a working men's club or whatever. Fine, like, I totally get that. That's great. But you can't then do that and go, oh no, but we stand for the grassroots of the wrestling, blah, blah, blah. Another common argument for all of this is that, well, now there are more eyes on British wrestling than ever before, and more people are going to shows and stuff, when the evidence doesn't really support that at all. You look at ICW, right? Scotland's biggest promotion, one of the most buzzworthy companies in the UK. 2 years ago, they hold their first show at the Hydro, massive venue in Glasgow. 6,100 fans. It's the biggest British wrestling show in decades. It's a huge success. Great. 1 year later, again, big show, big names. I think Kevin Nash was there that year. Kurt Angle, I think, wrestled Joe Coffey in the main event. 4,000. Okay, that's a big drop. Still a really good crowd. This year, same again. I think your big name was Jeff Jarrett, and he was a guest referee. So not quite on the same level, although Michael Hamflett would argue otherwise. But still, this year, 2,000. So that's plummeted. The bubble hasn't necessarily burst, but it's definitely deflating.
Bubbles do burst naturally. That's just what they do.
Yep.
But the parallels between the timing of WWE's infiltration of the scene and the subsequent deflation of that scene, they're very telling.
So
very telling.
Where do we go from here? What does the future hold? Both in terms of for wrestlers, British wrestlers, and British wrestling promotions. We've obviously got Defiant Wrestling. We're seeing it firsthand.
If you look at the ramifications of it, and most metrics do determine the fact that there is a definite slide in popularity on the British scene right now, you need to look at it from two perspectives for me, if you want to effectively argue against WWE, from the punters and the fans, from the punters and the guys. if you are a fan nowadays, if your local promotion is no longer able to get the biggest British stars who are now being told by WWE you can't work there anymore, what's the impetus for you to really want to go and see those shows if the stars aren't there? Like, I'm not being funny. Like, it's nice to support and it's a nice night out, but ultimately you're paying your hard-earned money, and like people in this country, even though the Tory government will not recognise it, work really, really hard for their money. And personally, I want to see some bang for my buck. On the flip side of that, if you're a worker working these towns, you're not going to get that good a payoff because the punters aren't there, like the gate isn't there, and if you can't work with the top elite performers in your current scene because WWE tells them they can't work there anymore, how are they going to get much better? Like, iron sharpens iron, you know? I just think, how can you watch any episode of Raw and not determine that WWE are the heels in this scenario? Like, I find it absurd.
Yeah, it's mental. I think a lot of it comes down from the generation who've been bred to believe that Triple H, and within reason, is going to be this savior. And then when Vince McMahon steps aside and Triple H assumes control, everything's going to be great. It's going to be benevolent. It's going to be this, I said it right that time, it's going to be this massive network of WWE helm promotions, and it's going to change the brand, and Raw's just going to be right like NXT, and it's going to be this and that. Oh, nonsense. That man learned everything he knows about promoting from Vince McMahon. It's an absurd level of enthusiasm. And now I get that people want to be positive and they want their British indie scene, which was absolutely blooming until WWE rode into town, to be this wonderful thing forever. But that's just not how it works. I think the bubble is going to deflate. Number of promotions in operation, like Michael Sidgwick has said, the paydays are going to go down. There's not going to be opportunities to develop and grow. It's going to bottom out. It'll rise back up in years and years and years, but it will rise back up. I think there is one exception to all of this, promotion-wise, and I think that's Rev Pro, who have a working relationship with New Japan and draw 1,000 people to York Hall without fail every single time, have a lot of buzz around the product. They're doing Pac versus Will Ospreay. They're doing Pac versus Zack Sabre Jr. They'll be fine. The rest of the scene, I don't know.
Do you think this is going to be detrimental in the long run for WWE NXT UK as well? Because they can't send people out, like you say, to develop if they're just completely insular. As much as they'll have almost all the best British wrestling talent in the UK who want to work for them, is it just going to be the fact that they've got all the fish in the same pond at that point?
I don't know. I can't see NXT UK like approaching what the domestic version does, because I think a lot of the reasons why people were so happy to accept Triple H's initial courtship of the British scene is because look at how great NXT is. It's absolutely outstanding. It genuinely feels like a product from the ground up. Every single area of it has a certain passion underpinning it. People love working there. People love performing there. People love watching it. It's essentially a cult. I get none of this love. I get none of this passion when I watch NXT UK. I get absolutely none of it. It just feels so cynical. And I think without that kind of organic relationship between fan and product, which really did help drive NXT's success because it was the complete antithesis to WWE. That's what it promoted itself around. Without any of that, like, people don't watch 205 Live, and it's got established American stars on it. Like, who's really watching NXT UK? I would be so interested in seeing the metrics, the viewing data on that, in particularly 3 months when the novelty factor's worn off.
Final question,
it can't be good.
And it may sound ridiculous, this one, I'll ask it anyway. Are WWE in this move making wrestling almost too corporate?
Oh, absolutely. That's their goal, right? Like, to swallow everything up and replace it in there with their own homogenized version of what sports entertainment should be. Like, they want all the shiny things. Vince McMahon, Scrooge McDuck, this is his goal. He's a hoarder. Like, it's the reason they're going around America now, signing up all these guys as well. Like ACH, I think, is joining in January. Jonah Rock from Australia, which is supposed to be the next big blooming indie scene. So they're already working on that scene as well. It's what they do. They swallow everything up. They take your potatoes in and spit them out as bad Burger King fries.
And in my sort of last words, I guess, on this, if people don't think WWE could possibly be this greedy, like by taking money from the pockets of promoters who realistically are going to draw, what, a couple of hundred at best. If you think that's too small fry for WWE, if you think that money is something they don't want, they willingly went ahead and promoted a show in Saudi Arabia after the murder of a journalist. Like, no money is too dirty or too small for a company like that. I mean, just revise your history.
Yep.
There's no dollar that they would ever turn away. Like, or depressingly enough for us now, there's no pound either.
Well, Michael, Andy, thank you so much for that. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Really intrigued to see what people think about this. And you can tweet us at WhatCultureWWE. Whilst you're there, you can follow all three of us. You can follow Andy Murray at
Andy H. Murray.
You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
I do like British strong style in the ring. Sidgwick.
They're actually great. They're really great.
They're really great. They're great.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. You can follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. Once again, my thanks to Andy and to Michael. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.
Violent energy. Shooting forward into the knees of Jacob. Cleo with the elbow drop. The kamikaze catches.